Okay, let's unpack this. So today we're doing a deep dive into, well, a real paradox from the 20th century. Martin Lloyd-Jones, or MLJ.
Right.
Our sources paint this picture of a man who was physically quite short, known for being pugnacious, totally lacked humor in the pulpit.
Not even a little bit.
No illustrations, apparently. And yet, this is the guy who held thousands of people completely spellbound. We're talking 50, even 60 minutes at a time.
Yeah, it almost sounds unbelievable now, doesn't it? Just sitting there for an hour.
Exactly.
So our mission today is really to figure out what was going on there. What was the method, the power behind his preaching.
And how did his background, he was a doctor first, which is wild. How did that shape things?
And his critique of public speaking, too. He had some really strong views on why it was declining. Plus, the bigger picture, what killed off that whole era of great preaching after the 50s.
Okay, let's start with his actual technique. He called it logic on fire. Eloquent reason. That was his phrase.
Yeah, for him, preaching was everything. The supreme passion of his life, as one source puts it. It was this intense mix of really rigorous thinking and, well, spiritual heat.
And that rigor, it links back to his first career,
Right.
as a physician.
Absolutely. It's fascinating. He saw Christian faith almost like an applied science. He literally called it a remedy for the cure of sin.
So the sermon wasn't just inspiration, it was a prescription.
Pretty much, like a medical consultation. His style was diagnosis first, then prescription. He'd use the Bible to diagnose the problem, sin, doubt, whatever the issue was,
Right.
and then offer the specific biblical cure. So you weren't just like attending a service, you were there for spiritual examination.
That makes sense of the sheer effort he demanded. I mean, this wasn't light listening.
No way.
When you look at his preaching record, it's kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah.
13 years just on the book of Romans.
13 on Romans, 8 years on Ephesians, 6 on John's Gospel. It's staggering, really. This wasn't just preaching. It was basically a full theological education delivered week by week.
From the pulpit.
Exactly. His mind was, by all accounts, incredibly analytical, logical, which is probably why he gravitated towards Calvinistic thought. Thinkers like B.B. Warfield, very structured.
So how did that analytical approach come across in the actual delivery? The sources say it was like the Socratic method in action.
Yeah.
What does that mean in a sermon?
Well, it means he wasn't just telling you things. He's trying to train you how to think using the Bible. He'd lead listeners step by step through the text, logically, deductively, until you arrived at what he saw as the inevitable conclusion. The goal was for the logic itself to compel you, even before this sort of spiritual feeling hit.
Okay, but wait. If you're doing intense logic for an hour, didn't people find that, well, boring? One source mentions it could be monotonous or even intolerable for some.
Yeah.
That sounds like a tough sell today.
Oh, for sure. It's a definite tension. But that's where the fire part of Logic on Fire supposedly came in. For the thousands who did connect with him,
Right.
they felt that logical analysis was delivered with such conviction, such powerful, gripping language, sometimes even thundering, that it became completely memorable. Substance over style, you could say.
That really brings us to this key distinction he made. He was very clear. A lecturer is not a preacher.
Yeah, this was absolutely fundamental for him. A lecturer, in his view, might explore ideas in the pulpit, maybe raise questions, seek truth.
Okay.
But the true preacher, they stand there because he has found it. The job isn't just to share information or teach doctrine. It's primarily inspirational. It aims for what he called an existential meeting with God. It's about authority, not just inquiry.
And that very high view of the calling itself shaped who he thought should be preaching. He had this really specific life of requirements for a genuine sending call from God.
He did. 5 things, apparently. You needed this undeniable inner conviction. Your gifts had to be recognized by the church. There was this intense feeling of constraint, like you had to preach, you could do nothing else.
Wow.
And interestingly, a deep, genuine sense of your own unworthiness for the task. It wasn't for just anyone, a very demanding standard.
A sense of unworthiness is a job requirement. That's not what you hear in leadership seminars today.
No kidding.
But it explains why he was so against, say, lay preaching, or his firm stance against women preaching to mixed groups. He saw it as going against that specific divine mandate.
Exactly. The calling was selective, authoritative. And that deep sense of authority, that certainty, is apparently what created this electric quality people felt, even though the setting was so plain. Austere chapel, no choir, just him and the pulpit.
So how did he pull off that electric feeling with no jokes, no stories?
pure conviction in the power of the language, it seems. He spoke with absolute certainty. Phrases like, "I'm absolutely certain," or "this message is from God." He wasn't offering opinions, he was making declarations.
Okay.
And he could be really confrontational. Our sources say he would sometimes scold the listeners, even call them fools, if he thought they weren't taking the text seriously enough.
Hold on. People traveled across London, sat for an hour, to potentially get called a fool by this intense short man, and they liked it. That's bizarre.
It sounds it, but the context might be key. Post-war Britain, lots of uncertainty, national reconstruction.
Right, a time of flux.
Exactly. The sources suggest people were actually hungry for that kind of unflinching certainty, maybe tired of wishy-washy answers. They wanted someone to tell them definitively what was true, and MLJ offered that rock-solid confidence.
Okay, let's link that internal certainty he projected to his critique of the wider world.
Mm-hmm.
He thought the church was losing its impact because public speaking itself was in decline. He called it Baldwinism.
Yeah, after Stanley Baldwin, the prime minister, Baldwin favored, simple, plain talk and was suspicious of grand speeches. MLJ felt that attitude had seeped into the culture, creating this prejudice against preaching. Eloquence started to look suspicious, maybe manipulative.
And he'd contrast this with the classical world, right? Figures like Pericles or Demosthenes, who used powerful oratory to shape history.
He did use them as positive examples of persuasive power. But it's worth adding a bit of nuance here from the historian Plutarch, who wrote about both of them.
Oh.
Well, Plutarch notes that Demosthenes, after firing everyone up for war, actually ran away like a coward in battle. And Pericles, while he won his war, arguably caused it in the first place with his policies.
Ah, okay.
So maybe MLJ's heroes show that eloquence is powerful, yes, but also potentially dangerous, a two-edged sword, as Plutarch implies. Perhaps Baldwin's caution wasn't entirely misplaced.
That's a fair point. But nuance aside, MLJ himself was pretty uncompromising when it came to the new communication methods popping up then. He really seemed to be fighting the media age.
Oh, absolutely. He hated things like group discussions or panel debates, especially the kind you'd get on radio or TV. He called them sheer entertainment. Basically useless.
Why?
He argued non-Christians were fundamentally incapable of entering into a discussion about faith meaningfully. So for him, debate formats just diluted the authoritative message.
And he refused to do regular radio or TV appearances, not because he disliked the tech itself, but because of the time constraints.
Exactly that. He hated that broadcasting schedules forced preachers into delivering short, snappy messages. He felt it restricted the freedom of the Spirit.
So the Holy Spirit needs 50, 60 minutes minimum.
That was his conviction. Only God should decide how long the sermon needed to be, not the BBC schedule. He felt being forced to shorten the message was being fettered and chained. He just refused to play by those rules.
That fierce independence really sets the scene for our last section. What happened to these pulpit kings? Because MLJ, while huge, wasn't alone. Post-war London had other giants, didn't it? Leslie Weatherhead, W.E. Sangster, John Stott.
That's right. It was a real golden age for preaching in London then.
Huh.
All highly educated, all drawing massive crowds, all masters of the pulpit in their own way.
But different styles.
Hugely different. MLJ was the rigorous, doctrinal, Calvinist diagnostician we've been talking about. Sangster was known for being passionate, imaginative, emotionally intense. Weatherhead was more conversational, focused on holistic well-being, pastoral care.
And yet, London audiences supported all these different authoritative approaches at the same time.
They did, which is fascinating. The crowds were diverse, too. Professionals, lawyers, doctors, students from all over the world taking furious notes, even politicians like George Thomas or Kenya's Arap Moi.
What united them, do you think?
Seems to be a shared desire for clear, strong leadership and answers in a really uncertain period of rebuilding the nation and navigating moral questions.
But then, by mid-50s, early 60s, this whole era starts to fade pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Why did the demand for the hour-long sermon just evaporate?
Well, there were several shifts happening within the churches themselves. A move towards more liturgical worship, the rise of the ecumenical movement focusing on fellowship rather than just the sermon.
Okay.
You also had the charismatic movement gaining ground, which favored more informal, participatory worship styles. And the big nonconformist denominations started losing some of their scholarly leadership influence in universities.
But the sources seem to pinpoint one thing above all else. television.
Yeah, that seems to be the defining factor. The rapid spread of TV in the 50s and 60s just fundamentally changed the cultural landscape.
How so?
Electronic communication, watched at home, started replacing the big public meeting, the set-piece speech, as the main way people received information and instruction. Why travel across town to sit in a huge hall when you could get information or entertainment right there on your sofa?
And MLJ saw this happening.
Oh, he watched it with dismay. He saw the powerful orator being replaced by, in his rather blunt words, grinning ninnies, his term for television personalities. The whole medium shifted from the public stage to the intimate screen, and that slow, hour-long logical argument just couldn't hold its own against the immediacy and visual nature of TV.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. What does this all mean for you, the listener, today?
Yeah.
We've really traced the rise and fall of a specific cultural moment, haven't we? Where this logic on fire style, perfected by MLJ, could thrive because the audience was ready for that kind of sustained, authoritative voice.
Right. And this deep dive really highlights how dramatically technology can shift things. It changes who gets to be an authority figure, what kind of personality captures public attention. The move from the pulpit to the TV screen just demanded a totally different approach, especially in terms of pace.
Though MLJ wasn't totally pessimistic, he did believe great preaching was just in eclipse and would return someday.
He held on to that hope, yeah.
So here's the final provocative thought we want to leave you with. Given today's digital world, with attention spans shaped by the very short, snappy messages MLJ despised, what form could an authoritative, maybe even 60-minute message take to actually hold a modern audience? Is that even possible anymore? Or is the era of short-form communication just permanent now?